Hello, everybody, and welcome to the media show on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Pellavito. I'll be your moderator for this food fight today. And with that, we're going to bring in some of our esteemed panelists. First of all, a person who has over 100 years media experience and runs almost everything on the network. We'll bring in Mr. Mark Lee. Mark, welcome to the media show. We're going to have some media people here, and he's in the Raleigh-Durham Research Triangle Park area. But as we reach to Hollywoodland, we find a person who's the Mega Society member. We'll bring in Rick Rosner. Rick, welcome to the show. He also wrote for Jimmy Kimmel Live. As we head to Northern California, we'll bring in a chess player who wrote a book called Chess for Dummies, for all the dummies who watch our show and read this book. We'll bring in Jim Eade. And then as we head up to the north end, another chess player, but also the host of several of our shows on the network, we have Sasha Starr. And then another host of the Gamers Den, who also is running for office. I think he's running for governor of the state of North Carolina. Let's bring in the Honorable Jatovia McDuffie. Okay, he just made his announcement on the earlier show, Governor Jatovia. And of course, the president of Pod TV Network, Kim Calhoun. So,
he's got my back.
Wait a minute, aren't you going to be lieutenant governor?
I am. Jatovia, did you announce that?
I just understand that he's running for office. So, Jatovia, we're talking about the writer's strike, and I'm sure you have an opinion on that. And I'm sure your constituents will have an opinion on that as you're running for governor. What is your thoughts about this labor strife that exists in the great state of California? Because, people here in North Carolina, we don't know how to write. So we have no writer's strike going on.
Well,
it's a California thing. What are your thoughts on the writer's strike?
I am all for the writer's strike. It's necessary. It's one of those things. I mean, the writers themselves, you have the big companies making all this money, and then you have the other individuals getting pennies on the dollar. So, I am all for the writer's strike. I support them wholeheartedly. I actually have a few buddies that are writers themselves and have written for a few shows. One of them, two of them wrote Beetlejuice. That was on Broadway. I'm all for the writer's strike, and I really hope that there comes some negotiation happens, because their jobs really are still they're under fire, because with Chat GPT and all the Chat AI bots that are coming, I mean, you're looking at a lot of writers that are, one, going to lose their jobs because of AI, two, that'll they just want to feed their families. Give them some money.
Okay, we'll bring in Rick Rosner, who used to be a writer for Jimmy Kimmel Live. What are your thoughts about the writer's strike?
I did really well being a writer for Jimmy Kimmel Live. And yesterday, my wife showed me a big section in the newspaper detailing, I haven't written for TV in a few years now, detailing what it's like now. And things are bad. The writers are being squeezed in a number of different ways. And they interviewed these two successful writers who are making 7%, adjusted for inflation, of what one of the writers' dads made, when he was a writer 40 years ago. That it's a ratcheting. That in between strikes, a strike happens every 15 years or so. And until there's a strike, the production companies, the studios, figure out more and more new media, more and more ways to squeeze the writer's expenses down. And eventually conditions become so intolerable that the writers have to strike. You should be able, this one writer, a successful writer, gets shows on TV all the time, has to have a second job, and her husband has to work. And that's crazy. I mean, it's so, yeah, the Justine Bateman, you remember her from Growing Pains. She went, after Growing Pains, she went to school and got a degree in computer engineering. And she did a long Twitter thread yesterday about how screwed writers, directors, everybody is if we don't fight AI. She said that 5 years from now, and she's not lying, she's not wrong, that if you liked Growing Pains and if you want to order an 8th season of Growing Pains, a whole new season, AI will be able to generate that for you. And none of the original people will get paid.
Okay, but I don't think AI is very funny, but that's just my opinion. But somebody who is funny is a writer himself. He wrote Chess for Dummies. So we'll see what Jim Eade has to say about the writer's strike. What are your thoughts in Northern California? Or from what I understand, people in Northern California don't care about people in Southern California. So what are your thoughts, Jim?
Oh, first off, there is some tension between Giants fans and Dodgers fans, but come on, it's one big state. It's a very big state, and what I would say is I've written 6 books. I don't belong to the Writers Guild, but I am a fan of collective bargaining, because when we talk about owners and corporations, they will exploit you, and the history demonstrates that, going back as far as you want, since the dawn of the industrial age, and even before that, of course. But what we have here is we have to have regulations in place so that they don't employ children, for example, because they will exploit children. They will go for the person who will do the work for the least amount of money. And now, when we come to writers, now we're talking about a creative field where not everybody can do it. You can't just pay somebody to do it and do it well. Because I can have 500 channels and nothing to watch because there's so much bad writing as it is. And I don't want to see it diluted by artificial intelligence, although it's bound to happen. The progress of the future cannot be stopped. So that's going to interfere with it. But the people who are the creative sources of the things that are entertaining, that I am willing to watch and enjoy watching, they are precious and few. And they should be compensated for that. And when things go into residuals or beyond, they still, having created it, deserve some of that money.
Okay, well,
residuals for
residual. Guys don't get residuals.
Okay.
We'll have to have a serious talk, Rick. If you guys don't get residuals,
I get residuals. I'll get a check for $8 every once in a while.
Oh, $8.
The time of big residuals for reruns on network TV, that's pretty much done because everything's on streaming, and the current residual structure for streaming is you get bupkis. You get pennies. You don't get anything.
Hey Rick.
Now wait a minute. Netflix has a $12 billion a year budget, and they're not paying you.
Yes,
they don't have to. That contract was negotiated in 2008 before Netflix. Back when Netflix would send you a DVD in the mail.
Okay.
I remember those days.
That was before the streaming.
I remember those days when they would send you that DVD in the mail. Hey, Nick and everybody else here, guess what? We're talking about the writer's strike and some of the other things that are out there, but there is a state in the Midwest. I know that we are on the East Coast and the West Coast here, but there's a state in the Midwest that has come up with a brilliant idea. And I actually think that it could be interesting because they are going to protect the young social media influencers, because they realized that the young social media influencers were out there making money. So there is an Illinois bill that is going to entitle child influencers under 16 to a percentage of their earnings based on their content. So there was a young lady, a 13-year-old, that was actually scrolling through her media and realized that there was a pattern. Children even younger than her were becoming stars, dancing, cracking one lines, and being generally the way that kids will being kind of cute and adorable and all in that space. But then she realized that there was a lot of exploitation that can happen within the world of kidfluencing. That's her word, not mine. And then she realized that there was absolutely zero legislation in place to protect them. So Illinois lawmakers aim to change that by making their state what they say will be the first in the country to create protections for child social media influencer. So Nala Mutho, who is now 15, raised her concerns. Hey, that's what you're supposed to do. You got a concern, raise it to your Illinois state senator. And there is now legislation in motion, which will give them a percentage of earnings based on how often they appear on a video blog or online content that generates at least 10 cents per view. To qualify, the content must be created in Illinois. So if you're trying to create content in North Carolina, California, or someplace else, no help for you and everything. And kids would have to be featured in at least 30% of the content in a 30-day period. But at least we're going to try to find some way to help these kids get some money. So
that's better than Arkansas, which just is passed legislation to make it easier to exploit child labor.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I want to add something
Thanks for that.
here. I think that, the use of AI is being wrongfully put forth based on what we created it for many years ago. It was to enhance and create quality of life and quality of job solutions as opposed to replace people. But as we've learned from the CEO of IBM and the previous AI godfather from CEO, AI is not being used for what it was originally created for. But I want to say something here. Sometimes when things like this happens, it opens the doors for other opportunities. And, we can start our own nighttime TV show, right, Rick?
Yes.
And we can create something that people can come to and watch. We don't have to support the other networks because generally we don't anyway, because they produce things we don't care for. I've always been kind of a fan of some of the nighttime TV shows just because they were pure entertainment. You watched it knowing that they weren't telling the truth. You didn't have to take them serious. But I loved some of the stories and some of the interviews that they try to do. But, we can come up with our own nighttime TV show and get it going and bring the people to our network to watch, because we're not about banning things. We're not about boycotting. We're about uniting and working together and making the best of what we had. And we're not about collecting people's data and reusing it. So please watch our network, register to watch us. You can go watch us for free on Amazon, Roku. You can watch us for free on the web, because we're not collecting your data to regenerate for our own purposes, which, we've also been approached by marketing companies of, hey, that little device that collects your data and then starts sending you ads. We do that. And I'm like, we don't want that. We don't want to collect anything about people and push. And we want just good quality content. We'll have sponsors. We're going to get those. But we don't want to do that. And we want to provide the best we can for people that is entertaining, educational, real stories, like what Sasha and Jim and Jatovi and Mark and Lee and Rick all bring to the table. We want those kind of real people stories. So
we had a real people story that was launched yesterday, and that should be one of our last newer ones and everything. But Dreamstock is launched with a Mother's Day episode on yesterday. So if you wanted to go back and watch Miss Green, Shanice Green, and her conversation with her daughter, and she's got ties to the entertainment industry both here and nationally, so they will be bringing regular conversations in that space. But it was a very nice Mother's Day special on yesterday, so you can go back and watch that very authentic conversation between a mother and a daughter, and all in that space. Hey, Jacoby, quick question for you, because I didn't even know that this was a term, because like I said, I don't have any kids, I've got nephews and everything, but apparently there is a word out there called sharinghood, but apparently there are folks that are saying that the commercialized sharinghood industry, so I guess that's parents sharing their stories, and that's why it's a sharinghood industry, but apparently it can earn content creators tens of thousands of dollars per brand deal, but it's underregulated and can even cause harm. But that's what a University of Alabama professor, Jessica Maddox, said. She said, as we see influencers and content creators becoming more and more of a viable career path for young people, we have to remember that this is a place where the law has not caught up to practice. And she added that child influencers are in desperate need of the same protections that have been afforded to other child workers and entertainers. And to our fine folks in California, apparently that Illinois bill is modeled largely after California's 1939 Jackie Coogan law, in which a silent film actor sued his parents for squandering his earnings. So there are probably some folks that can do that even now and everything, because there are probably some child actors that have had their earnings squandered as well. So are you getting ready to do some stuff with those two lovely kids of yours and start a whole Sharon Hood industry? Because apparently there's a bunch of Sharon Hood going on in the world as well.
So content creation it's not ever going to be regulated because it's kind of hard to regulate it. It just depends on what group you're going to end up with. So for example, I mean, YouTube, when you create a YouTube channel, you're doing content creation right there, and you're creating whatever you want to. A big reason, just to touch on, I mean, like the Sharon Hood thing, that's just another thing that's popped up in content creation. I mean, you have your TikTok dancers, so you can go watch all the dance. I mean, it's just another thing, and so that'll be another fad that comes and goes. People will make money off of it. You had people doing all the different jokes. Oh, I'm going to eat ginger. And look, this is what happened. No, cinnamon. I'm going to do the spoon of cinnamon and see if I can really swallow that. And oh, no, I cough. Yeah, you're going to make millions off of that quick little view. And then, okay, yeah, you're done. That's your viral. Everybody's trying to go viral because once you go viral, you make money. That's what people want. And
people who observe this industry have noticed that the terms, the monetization gets, as with writers, the money you get for going viral, for being an influencer, tends to get crappier over time.
It does. You're exactly right.
They squeeze you. There's a term for it that involves a 4-letter word. It's called enshittification, where things start off good and then the companies, once they have you, once you're stuck on a platform, then they will just squeeze and squeeze and squeeze.
There are some influencers that, for example, Twitch had battled over one influencer, and they ended up signing somebody. They let another independent, I think it was Ninja, they ended up signing for a particular amount of money, so he couldn't actually do streaming on YouTube and do streaming on this social network. He had to be here.
Didn't an influencer just get in trouble this past weekend?
There was Marquez Brown Lee, I think, can only do it on YouTube, and so
but tell me, did an influencer just get in trouble this weekend? Because part of the nature of comedy, from my understanding, and I am not a comedian, no, I might tell a one-liner here and there and all in that space, but part of the nature of comedy is that you will sometimes step on people's toes, and definitely that apparently what happened with Chris Mayer, who apparently told some jokes over there in, one say it was either California or Texas, and apparently some people were not too pleased because they were jokes that were against the trans community. So apparently some people walked out, and that became a whole conversation on social media this past weekend and everything in the past week. But I was
Mark,
wondering,
let me just interject and play moderator for a while, because we're talking about the writer's strike and we haven't heard from Sasha or Lee. And I think we should give them a voice in this.
no, definitely.
I just have a quick question. We're talking about, child labor laws. Where are parents in this equation?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because apparently in France, thanks for a nice segue, Lee, and everything, they have those same laws with the child influencers under 16 get a portion of their revenue. But over there in France, and I know sometimes we like France, sometimes we don't. There are people even on this network that are very much French fans, and there are some that are not French fans, but they have the right to forget, which means that over there in France, the video platforms literally must withdraw the images of the child if the child asks the images to be withdrawn, because parental consent is not needed in that particular country. So if the child is over there going like, I didn't want that on there, then you got to apparently give them a little bit of leeway in that, because there's this whole right.
Generally, you have to protect from the parents. California has something called the Jackie Coogan law.
Yeah, I mentioned it. Yeah.
Which was designed when back in the 30s, when you first started having kid movie stars and our Little Rascals, our gang, the parents would take all the kids' money and leave them destitute. And so they passed laws that if you're a child bringing in money from movies, a big chunk of that money must be set aside so your sleazy parents can't take it.
Hey, Sasha, part of the film industry, I alluded to that earlier, part of the film industry, what was happening, I'm sure that the writers' strike may even cause it to go further, because I know North Carolina used to have, and Jacoby knows this as well, a very robust film industry. I think we were either third or fourth, depending on who you were listening to, behind California and New York. Florida and us were kind of going back and forth in that third and fourth slot and everything. But then we got smart, or maybe dumb, depending on the state of view and the search and everything. And we started not doing as much with tax credits and everything along those lines. And the film industry was like, we're not getting breaks. So we're going to go to Louisiana. We're going to go to Georgia. We're going to go to Canada. So I'm thinking that the writer's strike may cause more people to go to Canada. So are you ready for an influx of the industry coming your way? Because apparently that's part of what happened with the tax credits is y'all gave better breaks. So people started filming there in Canada, among other places. So are you ready
I
for an
think it's a great idea, Mark. If you will come and teach Canadian writers and content creators and everybody else how to go on strike or so. I never heard about, by the way, strikes of producers and leading actors and the studio owners. I never heard of that. So there must be something peculiar about the writer's strike. And I think we're talking about the natural forces of capitalism, where studio owners and producers and CEOs of all kinds are trying to squeeze from you as a writer as much product as possible and to pay at the same time as little as possible. So that's very natural approach. And at the same time, it's very natural for writers to go on strike as the only way to actually get paid more money or so. So there's a very fine balance in there. I think it's a great process, and I think it's doing its job, and eventually will do it.
There are two reasons why it's the writers striking now. And one is that we were the first to have our contracts come up with the Guild negotiates 3 years contracts that last 3 years. And ours came up just as AI was starting to kick everybody's butt. And also writers are in a prime position because if nobody writes anything, then everybody depends on somebody coming up with a script that you're going to make. But the AI is going, there are already virtual, very attractive lady influencers on Twitter who don't exist. They are generated by AI. And Justine Bateman, a writer, director, actor, said that what's going to happen is that all the popular actors, living and dead, Humphrey Bogart, Marilyn Monroe, Pacino, people who are getting older and won't be here forever, they will negotiate likeness deals where AI is going to get better and better. And it'll make like a version of Robert De Niro or Meryl Streep that won't bug you. You may be able to tell it's not entirely real, but it'll be close enough to real that you can watch a whole movie with them and it won't creep you out. And
they won't get older. I do want to point out that Vancouver, British Columbia, a lot of the film industry has already moved up there. So, this is part of what's going on in the world. It's competitive, and people will go where they can produce the films at the lowest cost. There's even states in the United States that have become more comforting to some producers of film. So this is another topic entirely. When we get to the content creator, the creativity, like I've watched South Park, I've watched totally animated stuff that's really funny, that's really good. And but somebody's creating that. And that's what I want to be rewarded, the creative aspect of it, the writing, the talent. And I want it not to be able to be one and done. Here's a dime for your work. Now we're going to make $1 million out of it.
It's going to constantly be squeezed, and AI offers a number of different ways, like a whole bunch of different angles to squeeze from, whether it's the original idea, whether it's turning the idea into scenes and lines. And there's a lot of stuff we watch that we don't expect good writing. Like I've seen a zillion Liam Neeson movies where he says the same stuff. Something bad happens, and he spends the rest of the movie like just beating up bad guys. You can tolerate a lack of originality in what's being said. And AI is already able to provide that lack of originality.
But Rick and Tuffy, along those same lines, there were two major stars recently, and three if you want to add Elvis, but they weren't past that long, but they are still doing concerts with their experiences. It's been a minute since, and I love both of these musicians, but it's been a minute since Prince and Michael Jackson died. But there are a number of concerts that are out there that are part of that experience where you get to literally watch Michael Jackson do all those thrilling moves and all in that space, and there are same things that are being developed around Prince and everything. Am I not correct about that, Jacoby? And are these doing fairly well when they hit the road and all in that space because of their popularity when they were living?
They just did a virtual reality Biggie Smalls concert.
That's what I thought.
He's been dead since what, 96?
Yeah, something like that.
But he held a concert in virtual reality. I mean, so the AI thing is coming. It's just we have to prepare for it. We have to get out ahead of it. And yes, it's going to take it's going to take a lot of writers' jobs. But what's next is it's taking a lot of programmers' jobs, because coding is also being taken over by AI. It's just we have to somehow get the writers paid, because the next step, you're going to have a lot of coders that are going to do the same boycott and are going to drop out. And when the coders start dropping out, that's going to be another big problem, because not only are you going to have no TV to watch, you're not going to have the ability to watch it on TV because the coders aren't going to fix the actual.
Right on. And also, you know, we've all had the experience where you try to complain about customer service and you get into an endless loop where you're never talking to a human being. You know, so just you're always now.
Also, when the coders drop out, then you get this AI generated code where it does what you want it to do up to a point. You don't know why it works because you didn't write the code and you can't get in there to figure out how it's, and so it becomes a black box and it might be doing stuff you don't want. We're just a couple of years away from AI radically disrupting medicine, which is good for people who don't want to die. But we're already in an economic crisis in the world because old people own just the biggest chunk of assets they've ever owned in history by just not dying. Boomers don't die at the rate of previous generations. And when AI transforms medicine and adds 20, 30 years to everybody's life, then you're in a world where nobody's dying and youngsters are squeezed. It's like with Biggie Smalls. Biggie Smalls' family, I'm sure, negotiated a deal where they make money, which is as it should be. But if you're a beginning singer or actor, you're not going to be competing just against other living singers and actors. You're going to be competing against every actor who ever lived.
You know, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, I've got a question, and I know that there's a major thing that goes on in the world. We all love it. I've also got to tease Jim a little bit when I ask this particular question and everything, because we do know that one of the main things that sells, Rick has brought it up on this show several times, is sex sells. There is no doubt that sex sells. But if we are getting older and all in that space, does that mean that we're going to see a bunch of 60 and 70-year-olds in a very intimate settings and all in that space? Because I don't know that the young folks are exactly going to be pleased at seeing grandma in a sexual encounter or something along those lines.
Now we know what Mark.
Mark, you missed. You missed.
Hey, whatever floats your boat, Mark.
Mark, do your thing, Mark.
No,
It's already here, Mark.
This is where I'm going to tease Jim. Because Jim and Sasha doesn't know this because Sasha doesn't always go back and watch the shows. But we did have a very poignant moment within the chess show on not this past Saturday, but last Saturday, because we have a great couple, a very powerful couple, and we showed some artwork. And at one point, the artwork was very much a little bit on the seductive side. And so Jim had to, as your
Did the ratings go up?
host, had to gracious
care. The ratings
analytics. Because I think that the show is what, about 45 minutes to an hour, but I think that 2 minutes of that picture is what is getting us some ratings on that show. So what do you think, Jim? Because I just noticed your face turned a little blue with Marin's Grandmaster Marin's wife decided to show
I
that
just
piece of
had to-
artwork. So
I was subbing for Sasha at the time, and I had to change the rating of the show to PG. And I was flustered for a moment. I admit.
Actually, during that show, I had real sex. I was had by my partner in a real chess game over the board, and he humiliated me and completely took me apart with my help, I must admit. But did I enjoy it? Somewhat, yes. Now, speaking about age, I want to mention
know anybody.
something that even without artificial intelligence, the age is going higher and higher and higher. And whenever you're discussing this, our future president, whether it's Trump or Biden, you must think about somebody like Kissinger, who is turning 100 years old, and he's going on a trip to Moscow and Beijing to work on a peace with Ukraine or so on. Never mind what he says and what he does, but he's alive, remember. He is alive at 100 years. So what doesn't permit somebody like what Joe Biden is 82, 86, 90? What's the problem for him being president for another 8 years or 12 years? So maybe he doesn't have right. It's in Canada. You can be president forever, prime minister.
Well, Supreme Court justice is for life.
It's different. Yeah, so maybe he will become a justice after his 8 years.
Right.
You touched on something where the pornography industry has been repeatedly disrupted by technology.
Yes.
When like it used to be very lucrative, a lot of sleazy guys were making a lot of money back in the 2000s, and then it became possible for everybody to make porn at home with their cameras, and it destroyed the industry. And now it's being destroyed again by it will be destroyed by. I've started to see AI models on Twitter being, and you can put. And they are there. You can put a 16-year-old girl's artificial head on an artificial, 28-year-old stripper body, and it's not child porn because that image is not a real person. It's AI, and so porn is getting creepier and also destroying the livelihoods of people.
It's been true since Photoshop, though.
Yeah. Porn is porn is a double-edged sword. As we continue on the OnlyFans version of Pod TV, so porn is a double-edged sword. It has pushed technology because it has really pushed not only the internet, it has pushed other not thinking of that part, but in other ways the internet is used and the technologies around it and so on and so forth. All that stuff has been pushed by porn, and because of porn, yes, our infrastructure is the way it is. It's much better than what it would have been. But yeah, there are bad parts because there's even there's technology where they've created, I think it's in Japan or China, where you could have it's a machine where you basically kiss the machine, and the person you're online with kisses the machine, so you're kissing each other, and it's
teledildonics. It's called.
What?
There's the same one that you utilize for other areas of the body.
We get the idea.
There's just tons of
we get the idea.
Okay, I'm going to segue.
Tell me,
the OnlyFans version.
When is the Consumer Electronic Show? When is the Consumer Electronic Show?
Great
CES is in January.
It's in the 1st of January, right? And when is the award show of that industry that you were talking about?
Oh, I don't know.
I think that's also the 1st of January. It was done intentionally. They were actually in the same space at the same time. So the industry and the award show used to be at the same time. Am I not correct, Rick?
No, I think you're correct. Yes.
So there's
I know a guy
honestly,
who's
porn
like
industry-
Bill Gates, who's made hundreds of millions of dollars in software and hardware, and he agrees with Jacoby. He says that sex and porn is the primary driving force for new technology.
Yeah, I mean it sadly enough, it's true, because what we spend our energies on all the time is where the money gets spent. And that goes throughout everything that we do in our society. When we push, or if we're fearful of something, that's where our money's going.
Well,
Oh,
bodice
no,
rippers
they're
have
taking
always
it-
been the best-selling novels that have been written.
Yeah.
So, come
Exactly.
on.
I mean-
we know that. And we also know that technology is changing everything. I was going to use Nakamura as the example. He's a great chess player, but he can't make a great living playing chess. So he's a streamer. And so now he makes much more money streaming, and he's got sponsors and all of this kind of stuff. So the technology is going to change the industry. So when we talk about a writer's strike now, we have to combine the two things, like Sasha very articulately described, the process between the owner and the worker having to have collective bargaining to come to some sort of compromise solution. In the past, that was true. Right now, the jobs are changing, the technology is changing, and we don't really know it's the wild, wild west that we're trying to bring law and order into. We don't know what the rules are anymore.
Yeah, but this has been going on for a while, because I don't even know that Jacoby knows this story, so I'll put it out there in this space and everything. But me and my younger brother many years ago managed a rap group. It was called Styles and Phases. So it was probably in the late 80s, early 90s, and they didn't have hardly any success whatsoever. Some of them went off to have other career successes. And one of those career successes, after we stopped managing them, was I had a call from one of the gentlemen, and he was like, I'm going into a new business. I think he actually told my younger brother, and then I learned it from him. And can y'all guess what he became after having a mild success as a rapper in the local area? Rick, he was in a similar field that you were in for a hot minute. And instead of being a stripper, he was actually a porn star. So he actually became a porn star. And I think he may even still be in the industry, and all I know, because like anybody else, he probably changed his name. So I don't even remember what his
That's
stage
another,
name was.
the male side of the industry has also been disrupted by Viagra. It used to be you could have a nice career doing that if you could reliably, perform. And then Viagra came along and anybody could perform.
Well, that's the dark side of that industry too, because you have to perform, and so you have to take performance enhancers to make sure you can perform, or else you're not getting paid. You can't stand tall, you can't get no money.
That's what
Paradoxically, young
Allegedly.
people, every few years they do a survey of how much sex people in their late teens and early 20s are having, and it's down.
Yeah,
It's
way down.
historically low levels, down 20%, 25%, because there's such a cornucopia of fantasy land of porn that people have given up at aspiring to try to.
And they live on these devices now, our phones.
So I would blame it more on the actual activities like your phone and everything else, more so than porn. Porn becomes an easy scapegoat, just like gaming becomes an easy scapegoat. It's easy to say, well, it's porn, because where does your mind go once you hear the word porn? You're going to a dark place, and it's easy to take you there, because, well, for a lot of people, they see that and say, okay, well, this is a dark place. I don't understand the industry, but I hear bad things about it. And it's the same thing, same easy scapegoat for gaming. Well, this mass shooting happened because he played games. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But you're
But it's
right
not
that,
true.
that it is the devices in our hands are so distracting that people back when I grew up in the 70s, I've said this a million times, and everything in the 70s sucked. And the only thing good was sex if you were cool enough to have sex, which I wasn't. But now there's so much cool stuff.
Until the late 70s for me.
Yeah, there's so much cool stuff out there, including a ton of porn, that people are not pushed to try to connect to other people. You've got incels, for instance, involuntarily celibate young men who've kind of just like, they don't care about trying to be cool so they can get laid. They're in their, stereotypically in their parents' basements, typing away and, doing, kind of boiling away in their own angry juices, but not trying to get out there and meet women.
Well, it's also true, in the movie Clueless, which I think came out in the 1990s, there's this scene where they're talking on the cell phones and then they're walking down the hall towards each other. They turn and walk side by side, still talking to each other on their cell phones. So
hey, Jim, a friend of mine, when the Walkman first came out, and that was in the 80s, he actually had a nickname for it. And yes, he was part of the far left political front, but yeah, a college friend was very much involved in socialism and communism, and he used to call that particular device, and I'm sure he would have that same term if he still has those same politics. He used to call it bourgeois subjectivity, because everybody was in their own little world with their own little devices, listening to their own little sounds, and this was the very early stages with the Walkman. So
there's a word that we need to get back into fashion, Mark.
Oh, Sasha has a point.
Okay, I have a point that in writing, whenever you will compare something what created by a professional writer and artificial intelligence option, it's very subjective to compare two works and figure out which one is better, which one is more attractive, and so on. Very big difference, as we know, exists in chess. And I'll tell you that, in my opinion, artificial intelligence companies and its owners, they are very merciful to the chess players and chess community. Okay, they proved a level where they can play, and they sort of put it on the background. Okay, let's this guy to play. Here is a world championship match. Here is a tournament. Caruana is hopefully taking first place. Here's this and that. Enjoy. Because you know what they could do? They could take apart the last world championship and show the games full of mistakes and atrocities, and its creative element is next to nothing. Yeah. Then they could stage a huge championship, a real championship match between, say, Stockfish 18 and, say, either Rivka, or you will take this
AlphaZero.
Yeah, you're right, AlphaZero. Okay, so you take this, you put it on a real Wembley Stadium in London in presence of 80,000 people, and viewed all over the world with nice music and spectacle, and you can stage a musical chairs if you wish, and so on, and you have a great production which will be heard and seen by all the world, and will put a shame to all this.
Nobody will watch that, Sasha. Nobody. They used to
I can bet it will be second.
They're boring.
It will be second most watched production in the world after the Soccer World Championship.
Nobody watches.
I agree with you. The quality of moves, it will be boring.
Quality moves will be better, and the drama will be missing.
No, it's a 500 moves draw. But when you have all the production, when you will analyze each move and show it by far, okay, this Caruana used to play this, and Alohin was using to play this, but here's what AlphaZero came out with. This move, this is the best. This is all you have to memorize. Jamie can make an incredible production out of it, and thank God they don't do it.
No,
well, speaking of things that they don't do it, they do.
Not popular. No one.
Well, Sasha and Jim, could you kind of mix the porn with the chess, and then the knight and the queen could be doing something?
We've been trying to do that for years, Nick.
It could be very interesting. The knight and the queen, the king and the queen.
How many pawns? Take the queen.
I mean, it could be.
And the pawn becomes the queen. Is the pawn transgender?
I mean, it would be a very interesting show.
It could be very interesting. That could be our new show here on the network. But the chessboard issue, all of that. But there is a new job that is taking place that I am wondering everybody's thoughts of. because apparently, as we're talking and as definitely Jacoby just called it the OnlyFans version, there is a lot of folks now that the college kids have graduated. I know that both here in Duke and UNC, they just had graduation yesterday on Mother's Day, and now they're going out into the job front. And a lot of them have been doing things in the social media landscape while they were in college. But apparently there is a notion of a social media screener. So apparently if you're going for the jobs, you better think about what you did on TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, and all of those other things while you were in school. And apparently there are 70% of the employees who really said that they believe every company should screen their candidates' social media profiles during the hiring process. So what are we thinking if there are folks that are literally going to be out there, because apparently this is a new job, and they will be screening and scouring your social media to see if you had the porn version of chess, and therefore you will not get the job. So I was wondering what are our thoughts about this?
Yeah, well, I mean,
eventually everybody will have done something horrible on social media, so we'll all be in the same boat.
Guilty.
Well, you know what happens though? Big companies like to get one type of person working for them. Somebody that doesn't make waves, does everything that they're told. So if you're creative, you really don't belong in big companies, Mark. You have to be everything by the book, be extremely boring, be less intelligent, etc. And then you can work for corporate America. So, I think you're just, and you've seen this whole process. If you go through our traditional education, you're not educated today, you're processed through the education system. It's a system of processing. It's not a system of learning. It's not a system of improving your creativity. It's not a system of expanding your mind. It's a processing system.
Nick, how does that work? Jacoby works for one of the largest employees here in Raleigh and everything. Capital Broadcasting is a major employer.
Really? Jacoby got processed properly, but remember, Jacoby's going on to bigger things. He's running for governor and stuff like that. So
what Nick is saying about school truthfully is about just training you to work. Yeah. That's it. It's not trying to make you creative as possible.
And our sports
training you for a job.
Training us to be soldiers.
Exactly. So in terms of the screening, though, the screening process, I mean, I've been a part of that for a long time, so that's just normal. But the screening process, I guess, because of the stuff that's out there on social media, and companies are starting to see the blowback that happens when particular individuals are with them on social media. So that's when a lot of companies are starting to see, is this person really worth that? So that, I mean, that's understandable, but it is.
It's just my experience through school. All the brilliant people, they were downstairs at the university center playing all these crazy games, and these people were brilliant. They got crushed by the education system. The idiots were upstairs and they were, being processed properly, and the education system rewarded them. But I can go person after person after person. The brilliant people I met, most of them failed out of school. Okay, they had one thing.
Eventually, we'll all have like AI Jiminy Crickets on our shoulder saying, you really want to post that, or you're going to get in trouble 5 years from now if you put this.
We're going to we're getting
the answer, but I'll say, are you sure?
there will be an AI. No one has developed it yet, Rick, but somebody will develop an AI security check, for you.
Everybody remembers
Twitter does it already. If you go on Twitter and call somebody an idiot, as you hit send, it'll send a message saying most Twitter users don't use language like this. Are you sure?
Right. It's funny that a program like that would sell a lot, because one problem I have in my company, and I tell all the employees, all the emails can and will be used against you in a court of law, and it could be years later, because it's permanently embedded. Unfortunately, right now, no one has developed a program that could stop employees from saying something incredibly stupid on an email or social media site. That program, all employers would buy it.
There was a very good reporter who is going to become the head of Teen Vogue, which happens to be a very good news source, who lost her job because like 8 years before, when she was in high school, she said, I'm really tired today. I have Chinese eyes, meaning, and that took her down.
Yeah, well, even recently, yesterday, there was a basketball player, Jamont or something like that. He showed up on You know who he is? He showed a gun on social media. That alone got him like suspended. See, the bot would say, do you really want to show this gun on social media? Do you know people like you could have got suspended before?
The John Morant thing, that dude, he showed it once, and he got in trouble for it. Then he was with his buddy, suspended from going to Memphis Grizzlies games, and he ended up showing it again when he was hanging out with his buddy. That was just dumb.
Yeah, that was just speaking of things that are not dumb and everything. Jim, I've got to bring up something because you have definitely been honored by a couple of publications, so I think we should share that to the public as well. So I've got those lovely emails. So
can we see the publication?
What have you been honored by? Because I was going like Jim just becoming a world famous celebrity. He was already a world famous celebrity, so I'm just glad to know that I've got him as a friend in my corner and everything. But share a little bit about these latest honors that you have received.
Mark, you're making me blush, and I start out kind of red anyways. But Marquise who's been doing biographies for about 125 years, and they put me on their Inside magazine cover. They're telling the story about the Eat Foundation and what I do in different communities to build communities using chess as the way to do it. And the success that I've had and the difficulties that I've had in running my own foundation. So, it was a very nice recognition, and I'm very proud of it.
And you can't share the screen with it on the screen and everything?
I could probably do that, but
you got to figure out which button to push.
Yeah, let's see. I got stop camera.
You got to press the right button.
Yeah. Now I'll do that another time when I'm.
Okay, all right, no problem.
But thanks for mentioning it. Yeah, it's one of the things that you do these things. You don't do it for the recognition, but when it comes by, you're very happy to get it. But I also thought, when it happened to me, I was like, oh, I'm not worthy. I had all this kind of stuff like, oh my goodness, this is embarrassing. So you have to be prepared, because some people are wired for this. Some people love it, and some people are better in the background doing the work. So I'm working on accepting the recognition and using it to help raise funds, because it turns out it's all about the money. Demand greater than the supply. And
so there's a whole concept around that. I think Jacoby's heard it as well, but I do know that there have been people that have talked about FOMO, which is that fear of missing out. So apparently that is not something that you deal with, because apparently you were not even thinking that you were going to miss in. So, but definitely there are people that have a fear of missing out, and they are afraid that they're not getting that recognition, or that they even know how to deal with the recognition when they get it, and all in that space.
Yeah. But this gets back to I think that you're talking about why people do certain things, and when we're running a not-for-profit foundation, you're not doing it to make money, but it turns out that you're in it that you have to raise money. So it becomes this conundrum for a lot of people like myself, because I'm always asking people to give me money, and I say it this way: help me help them, because it's not going into my pocket, but nevertheless, I'm still got my hand out all the time, and it's hard to get used to that.
I would like to share something what's incredible happening in the last couple of days in Ontario Chess Federation. I'm one of the, I forgot who I am, a governor or something. It's absolutely amazing. There is a Ukrainian guy, he's I think 15 years old, came as a refugee to Canada just a couple months ago, and he wants to play in the Canadian Youth Championship. And of course, it requires travel to Calgary, staying in a hotel, entry fee, and all that stuff. So he approached Ontario Chess Federation for any help, even if just to pay his entry fee, a couple of $100, that would be good enough. Because there is an annex, a chess club in downtown, provided him with money for hotel, and I think somewhere else help coming for airfare. So these idiots are spending last several days discussing pros and cons of helping to pay this money. And they're so seriously discussing that Anti-AIDS Restoration is not a charity. It's a very serious organization that have to foster. And if you will help this young chess player, there will be millions of others who would like to ask for help. And what are we going to do? We will turn them down because we cannot help everybody and so on and on. And they are away. And at the end of the day, I wrote to all of them, please, let's us put together $20 each, and it will be more than enough money to give him for his entry fee. Let's just do it. Stop talking about it. Or organize a charity chess tournament with all entry fees. Will go toward him paying his entry fee and probably more. Anyway, nobody even replied to my email. Just shows you what an asshole sometimes you have to deal with.
Yeah, sometimes
Oh, we can add this to the screen. There it is.
Yeah, sometimes you got to be persistent, and there's the
Beautiful.
insight and everything. And we're winding down and all in that on this lovely media show that Nick does on a regular basis. One of the things that I know people get to when they think about writers is they're like, wait a minute, why are the writers on strike? The writers don't make they don't really make that much money. They are in a field that is a poor man's field, and they're probably going to be still continuing their jobs as waiters, because everybody that's a writer, as Jacoby knows, has like 5 or 6 other jobs as well. So it's kind of like me playing slight devil's advocate, because I do know there's some people out there going like, I don't really care about the writer's strike, but one, they got like 2 or 3 jobs, and 2, they are not making that much money, and they don't really need to be doing anything, because the whole Hollywood industry is corrupt and run by the man. That's what some of those people would say, and everything in that space. So,
And
Toby, what's your
specific
answer
type of
to
man.
those? And Jim, because like I said, I was totally playing the devil's advocate, because I do know some folks that have those kind of attitudes. So, what would your response be to those?
I would be confused because I don't know what they would be talking about. It was kind of rambly.
Well, the thing is that the economic distribution is so
Yeah.
skewed, where a very small percentage in California make all the money, and everybody else is screwed. Yeah,
Well,
I mean, it's almost shows the fault of capitalism, because very few people, and they have all the
Well,
money.
it's
and you can
unregulated free market capitalism, and the income diversity
Yeah.
level is shocking now compared to the way it was just.
And the Gini coefficient is so low now in the United States. Mobility is so low,
Yeah.
so we have a really stagnant problem. When we talk about the rich and the middle class, and it's all becoming either rich or you're poor.
When my
middle
dad
class
was growing up,
And that's
I was
kind
middle
of the
class.
point I was going, because Rick can probably testify to
Yeah.
this more than I can. He lives there in California, in Los Angeles, but I do know that there are quite a few folks that had relatively successful movies and everything that are still working as waitresses, still driving Uber, still driving DoorDash and a number of other things, because while they might have had that one hit was not a hit that stayed consistent. Like there are
It used to
a
be that
select
getting
few that are
one-
consistent.
It used to be that getting one series as a writer or a performer that ran for 2 or 3 seasons was enough to get you into a decent house.
You
Right.
went viral.
Now, one of the writers that the LA Times was profiling is somebody who's gotten a show on the air every year for the past 4 years, lives in a 1-bedroom apartment, cannot afford a house.
Yeah.
You ought to be able to afford a house. If
Yeah. And then if you ever go to the Wall Street
skilled
Journal,
enough to be a successful writer.
If we value it.
Well,
As
I
a
want to
society.
add something. This happened to the music industry when John Fanning created Napster, and none of the musicians were bringing home enough money to
Great
even
point. Yeah.
pay their rent. None of the writers, none of the producers, the directors, I saw their BMI reports, and it never improved. They never figured out a wiggle way room around it. They never have. They all still suffer there in Nashville. It's huge, huge depression area. And so one of the things that the top dogs figured out the way to make money, the only way to make money was to get out there and do concerts, right? And literally that is the reason why you see some of them get down on their knees and thank the fans for showing up. Now, I will say this, the price that you're paying for that ticket at that concert, they're not breaking even on those prices. Those prices are grossly inflated by the third-party vendors that are buying them. So again, the artist, the directors, the people who travel, the band, the people who coordinate everything, they're not making the money off of that grossly inflated ticket price. So remember that. In fact, we've decided to kind of boycott the big concerts right now until that gets fixed. And so we're going to all the smaller venues and local venues where the artists are getting full price for their tickets.
Well, they've got to fix that, and definitely that is a major industry that goes on there. And like you said, there's a lot of major corporations that are running the music industry and some of the other industries in that sense, and they have serious monopolies. But the other thing, and I hate to say it, is that there are a number of artists that are not having the support that they need, even in their own care and all in that space. Because I can tell you that there are quite a few musicians that are having problems with not only their rent, but their medical care and other things, because there are not enough organizations. Now, there are some, but there are not enough organizations that are helping these folks. And it's not just the poor blues singer or the poor jazz singer, but there's even some of our rock and pop icons that are facing difficulty in that space as well. So I'm actually one that thinks that we got to do something to help the creatives in some of their life skill kind of things and life
true in the
survival
chess
kind
world
of
too. It's impossible to organize chess players because the more creative you are, the less likely you are to organize. The less likely you are to see that you have something in common with someone else.
Chess players.
It's
Chess
true
players
for chess
are the
players.
worst.
It's true for writers. It's
Chess
true
players
for
are the
very
worst. We'll have to do
creative
that
people
on
also.
another media show.
No, it's easy. You can organize writers as long as you bring food and drinks to the picket line.
There we go.
Well,
That's
folks,
it.
we're going to have to wrap. We're at the top of the hour. Nick and I are going to be in California this week. So
San
we hope to see
Francisco.
some of you while we're there. You know, Nick?
Yep. In San Francisco. We'll see
All
you
right.
next week
Let me
on
know.
the media show. Bye-bye.